Hello everybody and welcome to a new video. We're going to continue with our GT Performer bike again, and today we're going to make the drivetrain, which is essentially the chain and the sprocket and the cogs. This is a little bit of a tricky build. I mean, the geometry is quite easy. The difficult part comes where we need to sync the size of a chain to the actual cogs, so they don't intercept with each other, which can be a little bit tricky. So here we just start with the chain, quite a simple structure. I've just sourced some kind of image online. I'm not sure where it came from. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but it looked good enough for us to build from. So we got the main face, and now I'm just trying to get the thickness, and I'm just trying to estimate it. We do go a little bit from the actual measurements. Just trying to eyeball in the sizing here. Now there's a few ways you can go about building this chain. Here we're going to do more of a quick and dirty way of doing it. Essentially, if you're going to build a real chain, you will need to make each link on its own, because when it then rotates around the pathway, which will be going around our sprocket, you will see the chains essentially bend at the pivot points, and if you want accuracy, that's how you would do it, and you would need to add two different arrays to the two different links. It's a little bit technical. I'm currently building a tutorial where we actually do this properly, so you can keep an eye out for that. But this is just more of a we're doing a simple build, so it will go on our bike and it will look great from a distance. It will even look great if we rigged and animate it. But if we wanted to get real world effects, there is another way we would do this. Anyway, the way we're doing it now, we will make the chain, we will add a array modifier and make it follow around the path. And one of the things I ran into with running it around the path is depending on how much you know about Blender, but if you have an object following a path, so if you have a link and you make it into an array, so you have 20 links, and then you make it follow a path, that path will make your object bend and distort to follow the path. So although you maybe not will see it so well, this chain is essentially going to be twisting and turning very, very, very slightly, and that's where it will not be so much like the real world. Again, there is a way to get around this using a proxy, and again I will get to this in my other tutorial. I've already filmed it. It might be a part of a bigger tutorial, of course, but it does work, and it does work well. But like I said, I think it's completely unnecessary just for what we're doing today. So we're going to stick to the quick and dirty, make a chain, get it around our path, and it will look great at the end, especially from a distance. So here's nothing special, just some very, very simple geometry. It's interesting when you start to make these bike parts and you have to do a little bit of a deeper research as to how things work. I mean, it's maybe quite obvious, but the chain sizes have to be some kind of a standard size, because the cogs of a bike also has to be a standard size. If they don't fit, then obviously they wouldn't go around the bike, and this is obviously quite obvious. But if we're gonna make it work in 3D, we have to apply the same principles from real life into 3D also. So our cogs need to be exactly the right size to fit to the chain. Here we're just going to steal some geometry. And here is where we will slightly cheat. Just trying to make sure we get an exact fit here. So again, to repeat myself, if we were going to do this the correct way, we would build 2 chain links, the internal piece and the external piece. You can see there's an internal chain and an external chain. These will be separate, and the pivot point will be where this inner cog is. But what we're going to do, because we can cheat, we're going to delete these 2 halves here. We'll hide, delete these. So now this is a repeatable chain. So we'll set the scale and the rotations. So now when we add our array, you can see our chain is fitting perfectly together. Take away our reference. And now we're just going to add a cube as a measurement tool. And we're going to see if we can roughly get the correct size. So we can see 21 millimeters roughly a chain should be. And if we size this incorrectly, hopefully it will fit our bike, as we've been trying to build our bike to real world size anyway. I'm just checking it with out subdivision here, because I guess we repeat the chain quite a few times, so it's good to be able to use it without subdivision to reduce our geometry, but add the subdivision if we want to have a close-up. So here we make a tooth to begin with, one simple tooth of a cog. If I remember correctly, this sprocket has 32 teeth. I'm not too sure how relevant that is. I'm guessing it is fairly relevant. As we said, we need to build things to correct world scales and sizes. So now we add a quick array. Just make sure it looks okay with subdivision also. And so now we add a quick circular path just to make sure that this will go round. So we add the origin of our teeth to the center of the circle, and this will help the curved path work properly. You can slow down to see the process. So here we go. So right now we have 43 teeth. That's quite a lot, so we're probably going to need to scale that up. So we just scale to make sure we get a correct fit here. Just reshaping a little bit. So this is essentially the curve we will be using. So now we just need to make sure the chain follows through. So now if we delete the curve for now, and I think I must have deleted both the curve and the array, so we re-add the array anyway. So we're just going to shape the entire cog. Again, here's a little bit difficult with the references. I'm not really sure if they're more like a pyramid from the profile, from the front view. So just make sure we have a shape which we're happy with. It's a little bit too rounded up here. That's not too bad. Okay, so we bring back our cog, and then we add our teeth into place. If we can find them, there you go. So now we just need to make sure the cogs and the teeth are the right size. And we can see here, you can see I've actually made a small error because the teeth are going every other, which is incorrect. It should go in every one, so I am going to realise this in a few minutes, maybe less. But we take the opportunity just to scaling the teeth anyway, because they are slightly too big. We can compensate, maybe reduce the size of these center pivots, or rollers, I guess they might be called. So it looks like we've got good spacing here anyway. We've just got we need double as much. So now we're reduce the size, so we make sure we get in everyone. So we need to bring down the offset. So a good trick is to look at the very last one, because the distance at the first 2 or 3 you might not see how far they are off, but the further along the array you will see the distance builds and builds. So if you go to the very last instance in the array, you will see here, you can see it's a lot easier to scale in the last. Here for instance. So now you can just do minor adjustments to make sure you get this right. If you get the last one right, the rest will be right. So here now we've got a good sizing on both the cogs and the teeth. But we need to scale out a spacer here, which will almost destroy our work. So now we do it again. Just check the last one here. So now we've got perfect spacing. So theoretically, if we send the chain around our path and our teeth around the path, they should be in perfect sync. Give or take, there's all, like I said, there's some small distortion, but it shouldn't be so visible. I think our teeth may be a little bit too tall. They stick out the top. So now we re-add our circle. I think I may have deleted our circle and our array before. So add circle, convert to curve. We take our chain, origin to the center of a circle, geometry to origin. And then we send the chain and the teeth around the path. So our cogs are definitely too tall. I feel like they stick out really far out the top. That we'll get to that in a second. We need to make sure here that everything is synced. So there's a small gap, but what we need to do is scale both of these together, I think. Because if we scale one without the other, then we're going to lose our syncing. There you go, we adjust the height. Looks a little bit better than maybe there. So we can just check. Just tidying up a little bit here. We've got so much geometry here now. it's better if we just put everything into a folder so we can hide things. So we apply the curve and array. So now we have our cogs, which are real geometry, not just an array. And we will make the centerpieces. We're going to save ourselves some hassle here. Instead of making the cogs and the central piece one total piece of geometry, having looked at this central piece, it almost looks like, I guess they do technically sit together, but you can see like a very obvious join between the teeth and the central plate. So we're going to take advantage of that and make it two pieces of geometry which just sit snugly together, which will save us some time and energy trying to stitch it together. The inside of the outside is a bit of a ball ache. So now we're back to just some standard building. We need to make these inner cutout shapes, and we will rotate them 3 times. As always, try and find a way to cheat. Copy geometry, trying to do things less times. So we want to keep basic shape down here of a circular edge. And then we can just copy this inner piece. And even better, we'll turn it into a small array, just so we get perfect spacing between these. Just make sure we need to separate this piece first, otherwise we're repeating everything. Separate that one, add rotation, 5, and there you go. So we'll collapse that so we get real geometry, and now we can just stitch things together here. Your life will always be easier with 3D if you find ways just to cheat a little bit. This is nothing groundbreaking here, we're just stitching geometry together, these shapes in here I'm pretty sure anybody can do. Maybe the most important part of this video today is getting the chain to sit perfectly. And we've still got that to come. We still need to make the small cog and run the chain along the bigger path. See, right now we've ran the chain around this cog, or the sprocket as it's called, which is half of the job. We know that it fits and the sizing is correct, but the actual path will just be between this sprocket and the smaller back cog. But it's always good to do a test run, make sure that we've got things correct. Here's a good example of making sure you understand how pivot points work. Maybe I'll make a video on it. Pivot points are very important when you're mirroring things against a 3D cursor or against an active object. For instance, now our 3D cursor is in the center of this sprocket, and when we spin it around, it will be spinning around the 3D cursor. I mean, it's hard to know how much you guys know coming into this video. Obviously, we might have newbies here, or could be people who are very, very much aware of what they're doing. But I mean, if anybody wants me to do a specific video, it's just, just comment, ask me. I can give you some information about what we're doing. Like I said, I use quite a lot of, I'm pretty sure everybody with 3D does, but knowing how to use your pivot points is fairly important. Here we're just trying to reduce geometry so we don't have insane amounts to work with. Spread out the geometry nicely. Nice-ish. So now we spin it again around the 3D cursor. I mean, honestly, one of the worst things I know is building circular geometry and circular arrays is the most annoying thing. Yeah, a lot of things we do tend to be arrays and circular motions. Here we just stole some geometry again, just trying to fill in a circle. This inner piece here is going to be completely flat, so it's not so important what the geometry looks like in here. We're just trying to stitch it together so it looks okay. We need to be aware that we need to get two circles in the center here. So our geometry doesn't need to be absolutely horrendous, but it doesn't need to be. There's no deformation, so it doesn't need to be great. Just a completely, good rule of thumb, if you have a completely flat piece of geometry, tables, pieces of metal which are completely flat, the geometry is not so important. You hear a lot with 3D about don't use n-gons and don't use triangles, and it's true to a certain degree, but it's very much depending on what you're doing. If you're making characters and anything to do with animation, then geometry is insanely important, but it tends to be less so with hard surface modeling. There was a time that I would spend a huge amount of time making this geometry in here very nice. So you can see that it's not completely flat, so we take everything and scale to the Y, so everything is completely flat. extrude the circle, add some depth to it, and I want the inner piece to be sticking just a tiny bit outside. So there's like a little ledge there. I'm not sure what's going on here. So now it looks okay. I want to check to see, we had a little bevel here. I also want to see how it looks with a subdivision surface again, if you want to do a close-up. First we need to resolve these crazy bevels. Most of the time it does seem to work if you change the mitre outer to patch instead of a sharp. So bevel on both. Check with subdivision surface, and yeah, I mean, it kind of works. Can maybe make it a little bit sharper. So here I just want to pinch together these tops here a little bit more. The simplest way to do that I just wanted to test it first. We can see. Just select all of them here. We could have just done one and redid the spin function technically. So that feels a little bit better in my heart. Okay. Need to add some creasing just here to help out the subdivision surface. Don't need to do all of this on screen maybe. So it helps out there a little bit. So now this is the rear cog, and as you can see we're going to take the teeth geometry up here and reuse it because we have the correct sizing spacing, which as we said before is really important because the chain needs to go around it. If we start resizing it, you can see we scaled it down, which is not a problem because we can scale it back up, but we should absolutely not be changing the width of this thing. So now we'll add the circle path, which we're going to run it around. And we can see from a reference image how many teeth we need to have. I'm not exactly sure why it turns itself upside down sometimes. There is a if you go into mesh and add geometry, there is a extra geometry, extra mesh, and you can add cogs. And I think you could have add a cog and use that cog as long as you would make sure that the chain then fits specifically that cog. I obviously choose not to. It's not exactly a huge amount of work to make a cog. Maybe do we have double faces here? You cannot run a loop through. There you go. This is not so. I mean, the small details I'm adding here. When you have really simple pieces of geometry, sometimes it's nice just to add, maybe a little bit of extrusion and jagged edge here and there. Just add a little bit of visual interest. The more you add, the more it looks like more realistic, as if it's designed. And that's also a quite an important thing for realism. I mean, if you look at our reference we have here, there's some scoring and some grooves and some text stuff which people generally just miss out completely when we're building this stuff. And it's not maybe so exciting, but it's the small details which give the impression that something is real. So now that cog is huge, but we can scale it down, and we'll see if we can place things in now, so we can get our path. So we can try and see roughly how cursor selected here, and then we send the geometry to the 3D cursor, so we get a perfect center here, and then we scale. We're kind of eyeballing it a little bit, how big this thing should be. I guess there, roughly. And these two need to be on the same side anyway. So then same thing, send the 3D cursor to the center there, object to 3D cursor, so we get a perfect center. Then we need to shift this out a little bit. They need to be roughly in line with each other from above. Which they are not right now. So we need to compensate, move one out and the other in. And I guess there's some kind of like spacing, some kind of connecting bolts. I guess I can have a quick look to see if I can find anything. Again, these things are surely not just sitting flush against the bike. There's always going to be some kind of bolt or spacing or something. Speaking of which, we have no bolts here, which we will also need to add. Which we can actually steal. So this we need to move in a little bit. I think. And our forks at the back here, they are very, very straight. We're going to need to grab them and pull them in a little bit also. You can see that they a little bit too far out maybe. So here we will steal some geometry, because we're now going to make our chain path. duplicate, separate selection, scale up a little bit. Then the same here, we'll steal some geometry, duplicate, separate, scale up, join them together, and then try and make a connection between them. Let's make sure they're in the same line and over the cogs. So we'll delete here to begin with, and maybe here, and we'll connect, and we can see if, let's make sure that's a straight connection. Depending on the bike, I guess there might be like a tiny bit of slack in here somewhere. That looks very loose. Yeah, so we're just going to do a completely tight chain here, which I think will be fine. But maybe if you really wanted to, you can drag down the curve at the bottom just to introduce a little bit of gravity. So here we will again connect. Just add some vertices, and then we'll space them all out so we get a completely even distribution of vertices. And then we will attach the chain around this and see how it looks. I expect a tiny bit of difference between the two, because we are also following the path. There's going to be a little bit of deformation in the path, but it's going to be good enough. Just see where we're at. We need to rotate the cogs a little bit also. So we're getting to the end of the video here. I'll add a quick clip here so we can see how things look when they are textured. Just need to scale things in a little bit here. Rotate this sprocket as there are some intersections. And we're also going to need to scale a little bit, I think, also. As we're not completely attached down the bottom here. But like I said, if we wanted to get a complete perfect fit, then we would need to make sure that our chain is not being deformed by the curve. And that's a video for another day. But this is good enough for what I want to achieve. Scale this together here. And then just check. And you'll see that we're good enough. We're in a good spot. It looks pretty much hits the spots around here. And also here. Can spin it a little bit. These cogs need to go around a tiny bit. But they're pretty much in between. Good enough. Good enough. Okay, thanks for today, everybody. See you next week. Pedals, probably. So this is the textured version. I decided to, I've only unwrapped one link, so you can see there's definitely a repeating pattern here, which I thought was good enough to save some texture space. And added some bolts here also. Just stole some geometry from before, and also a little cog here. Nothing groundbreaking. But here you can see our cogs are definitely hitting in between here. There's a tiny bit of distortion going on there. And if we look at the sprocket here, you can also see it's better than I thought it would be actually. It's hitting in between on every single cog. So we actually did a fantastic job here. The thing I can quickly just show you. So when you, it's hard to see here, but when you add something around a curve, essentially in real life, this piece of metal here will not deform whatsoever. It is a piece of metal, and the bending will occur here and here and here and at every single link, but you can barely see it. But because this is following a curve, essentially this link here is slightly bent. If our curve was in a tiny little circle here, this link will be really deformed, and there's a way of getting around that. You can there's a way here you can use instancing, and you can basically decide that this link here would not bend whatsoever. In our case, we've added the join here, so that would mean that 1.5 would not be bending, and that's not good. That's why you would need to do this as a link and this internal piece as a link. And then when you look at this link later, then you'll see more of a jagged pathway instead of this slight curve. I mean, I don't, maybe it's so minuscule up here, I don't know if we can actually see the bend. So yeah, you can barely see it anyway. So you can see there's barely any kind of distortion because these were exactly the same size, and there's a tiny bit of bending going on here, and that's why I definitely thought that there would be some teeth which are not lining up, but that was not the case. We hit it dead on, right in the bullseye. You can maybe here, maybe we could have rotated a little bit more. But yeah, I'm happy. Yep, just a little bit of extra information there, and to show you guys the result. But yeah, see you next week.